took us by surprise.
Yeah, we're not really ready yet.
You guys are the first ones here.
This is our annual study skills workshop for middle schoolers.
Yep. Our school's community service club holds this workshop every year to help kids like you learn the kind of study skills that will make school life so much easier.
That's right. See, we remember when we were in middle school and how sometimes we seemed just overwhelmed.
Then we got some study skills and why things just got a whole lot more manageable.
So here we are again, this time with some advanced study skills.
We'll get started just as soon as the other kids get here.
You didn't think you were going to be the only ones, did you?
Oh, don't forget we have to wait for Charlene, our partner. She's got all the handouts. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Okay, before we begin, let's have everyone introduce themselves. I'm Jody.
Carlos.
Charlene. And these guys are the kids in our workshop, just like you.
Kristen.
Mark. Sam.
Abigail.
In this workshop, we're going to work on some advanced techniques that we know will come in real handy. How to read a textbook.
Boy, could I use help there.
How to take notes from a textbook.
Not to be confused with taking notes in class.
I guess I don't even have to tell you how much trouble I have taking notes.
And here's a biggie. How to do a long-term project.
Long-term project?
But before we begin, we want to go over some basic organizational skills. Refreshers. Because if you don't have these things down, well, nothing else really works.
That's right. Organization is the key to success in school.
Okay, so here goes. Make sure you have all the supplies you need. Sharp pencils with erasers, pens that work, notebooks that aren't falling apart.
We recommend color coding your notebooks and folders, like red for English, blue for social studies. You get it.
Here's another tip. Get an all-purpose folder that you put in all your papers for the day, so you know where everything is. When you get home, transfer all of the papers out of the folder and put them in the subject notebooks and folders they belong in.
You can also put your homework in an all-purpose folder to bring back to school, so the next day you don't have to hunt around each period to find your homework. It's all in one place.
And speaking of homework, here's the most essential tool you can have. An assignment pad or student planner where you write down all, we said all, of your assignments.
And when you get home, transfer all long-term assignments, project due dates, and test dates to a monthly calendar. And make sure you put all of your other obligations on the calendar also. Team practices, visits to your aunts and uncles, and even parties.
But remember, guys, monthly calendars, student planners, all that stuff. None of it works unless you make up your mind to be responsible and meet your obligations.
That was a lot to remember.
And to help you remember all the important stuff, here's a handout with all the points. You'll get yours later.
I took the basic study skills workshop where we learned about this, and, well, some of the things I had to change, like the all-purpose folder. I couldn't keep the papers I got during the day and my homework together. Everything was a mess.
So what'd you do?
Well, I got 2 folders, one for homework and another for my class papers.
Hey guys, we forgot to mention something. See, here's the thing. With all of these skills and tips, it's important to remember
Very important.
Absolutely essential.
that these are guidelines, generalizations. To make them work for you, you have to make adjustments.
Yeah, make it personal. Adapt it to your own style.
Yeah, make any changes you have to.
That's the only way it'll really work for you.
That makes sense. I mean, everybody's different.
Okay, guys, let's get going and get out of here.
So I guess this is the reading the textbook part, right?
Not really. First, we're going to talk about reading. Regular, general reading.
Hey, we know how to read.
Of course. But did you ever stop to think that reading is an ongoing process?
A skill that you keep improving.
Like, the more you read, the better you get at it.
Think of it this way. You've been running since you were a little kid, right? You've been doing it your whole life. So let's just say one day you decide to run for track. So you practice and practice. The more you run, the better you get at it. It's still running, but it's not the same running as you did when you first learned.
That makes sense. I mean, the more you do anything, the better you get.
So just because you know how to read doesn't mean you're as good at it as you're ever going to be.
So the more I read, the faster I'll get.
Well, speed is what comes to mind, but that isn't really what we're talking about.
Yeah, we mean understanding, comprehension, and enjoyment.
So often kids say, all I have to do is read. but there are all kinds of reading. And how you read is going to depend on what you're reading and why you're reading it.
I still don't get what you mean.
Okay, how about instead of reading, we're talking about walking. Let's just say you're walking down the street, going nowhere particular. You might walk nice and slow. But if you're going to meet a friend at the movies, you might walk with a little more purpose, a little faster. But if you're going to miss the bus, well, you're really going to move it.
Same action, walking, but very different depending on the situation.
It's the same with reading. Sometimes you read with a little bit of concentration, like if you're reading a magazine. You can probably flip right through it. Sometimes you read with a little more attention, like if you're reading a book for pleasure. And sometimes you read very, very carefully.
Like if I had to read poetry, I have to read like one word at a time and really think about what it means, or else I won't understand anything.
It doesn't only have to be something that's hard for you. I mean, I like to cook, and if I'm making something new, I read the recipe very, very slowly and keep going over it. But if I'm reading, let's say, the list of television programs in the paper, I go a lot faster.
Exactly. So the first thing you have to realize when you sit down to read is that what you're reading is going to play a big part in how you read it.
So now let's talk specifically about reading the textbook. Now, you don't read the textbook the same way that you read a magazine, or a novel, or poetry.
With textbooks, I think a lot depends on the subject. I mean, it's easier for me to read my social studies textbook than my science book.
Absolutely. The subject does play a big part in how you read. Also the purpose.
Purpose?
What we mean is, you ever sit down and ask yourself, why am I reading this? What's expected of me?
Why am I reading it? Hello, because I have to.
Well, let's go back to what Chris said about reading a recipe. Remember when you said when you read a recipe, you read it slowly and carefully?
Right, otherwise I could forget an ingredient or put the wrong amount.
That's when you're reading the recipe for the purpose of cooking. But what about when you're reading the recipe to find out if it was something you might want to cook? Now, would you read it the same way?
No, I wouldn't be so careful, and I wouldn't concentrate so much. I'd just give it a look.
Scan it, right? Same reading, different purpose.
Oh yeah, I never thought about that. Did you?
So, if you ask yourself, why am I reading this? The purpose of reading, in one case the answer would be, so I can cook it. Cooking it would be the assignment. On the other hand, the answer could be, to find out if I want to cook it. So finding it out would be the assignment.
And in each case, the purpose or assignment will play a part in how you'd read.
Same with reading a textbook. You need to understand the assignment, the purpose behind why you're reading whatever it is.
And in school, if you pay attention, it's almost certain the teacher has told you why you're doing the reading. She might say,
The assignment tonight is to read Chapter 8. You might not understand everything, but it will give you a good introduction into what we'll be covering tomorrow.
or,
The assignment tonight is to read Chapter 8, so we can discuss the material tomorrow.
or,
The assignment tonight is to study Chapter 8. It will give you a good review of everything we've covered in class and what will be on this week's quiz.
And here's a biggie. If for any reason at all you don't understand what the assignment is,
why you're doing the reading.
ask. Ask a teacher or ask a friend.
So you know you have to think about what you're reading and why you're reading it.
And that's going to help you figure out how much time the reading is going to take. The more concentration, the more difficult, the more time you have to schedule. You just can't say, I have to read 10 pages.
They're right. It takes me a lot longer to read 10 pages of my social studies textbook than it takes to read 10 pages of a novel, like To Kill a Mockingbird.
Not me. I'm just the opposite. Reading fiction takes a lot of concentration. I guess this is one of those everybody's different things.
So when you plan your study time, make sure you consider how long it's going to take you to do that particular reading.
Do you do that? I never do. No wonder my homework schedule is always a mess.
Now let's get to the actual reading part. This is the textbook we're going to use. The assignment is to read Chapter 6 and to discuss it in class tomorrow. Mark, if you were to read this, how would you go about it?
I'd, open to Chapter 6 and read it, right?
Wrong.
Yep, wrong. We're going to introduce you to a whole new way of reading a textbook. It's a 5-step program called SQ3R.
Mark,
You said the first thing you do is open up the book and read the chapter, right?
Yeah.
Well, we say the first thing you should do is look the chapter over.
The same way you would with this magazine. Abigail, how would you read this?
Well, first I look at the headlines, then the pictures, then the captions, the words in different colors, the stuff that stands out.
Yeah, and that would give her an idea what the article's about.
So you'd scan it, or survey it.
Okay, survey.
Okay, and that's what you have to do with the chapter in the textbook. You look it over, scan it, survey it. And that's the first step in the SQ3R method that we mentioned.
Look at the headings, the captions, the words in bold print, pictures, timeline, the whole thing.
This textbook is really good, see? It gives you a guideline to each section.
That way you don't come into the reading cold. You at least have some idea about what it is you're going to be reading.
And as you're doing that, you can think to yourself, well, what do I know about this?
Yeah. It might be something that you've studied in an earlier grade, and now you're going to go into it in more depth.
This chapter, for instance, is about English colonies in North America.
I get it. And in elementary school, we learned all about that. Pocahontas and John Smith.
And the Pilgrims.
Surveying gives you the opportunity to recall information before you even start reading.
So, step 1 is survey. Now step 2 is question. And what we mean by that is to take the title of each section and turn it into a question. For example, this says, The Voyage of the Pilgrims. The question might be, why did the Pilgrims make the voyage?
So when you read the section, you're reading to answer the question. You have a real direction in mind.
It helps you to focus your reading.
And reading is the third step.
Let me try. The next section says hard times at Plymouth. I guess the question would be, what were the hard times?
You got it. Now, go on to step 3. Read the section to answer the question.
Okay. It says the first winter was so hard, there was so little food and so much disease that half the pilgrims died. That was called the starving time. But in the spring, an Indian walked down to the settlement and said, "Welcome, Englishmen." His name was Samoset, and he introduced the settlers to another Indian named Squanto, who helped them plant corn, beans, and rice.
And whether you know it or not, you just completed step 4. Recite. You answered the question in your own words.
So what's the next R in the SQ3R? S is for survey. Q is for question. The first R is for read. The second R is for recite. What's the third R?
Review. And a lot of textbooks, like this one, are really good with that. See? It has a whole review section with questions in it.
Read the questions. Try to answer them. If you can't, go back and read the text again.
You know, I'm going to give this a try.
Another good way to review, of course, is to look over your notes. We'll get to that next.
But first, let's go over the how to read a textbook tips. And then you'll get some handouts. Reading is an ongoing process. The more you read, the better you'll get. When reading a textbook, use the SQ3R method. Survey, question, read, recite, review. Try to bring some information to your reading. Ask yourself, what do I know about this subject? Plan your reading time. Take into consideration the difficulty and the amount of concentration that your reading requires. Read for pleasure. Reading can be one of your most enjoyable leisure activities.
Well, isn't this the note-taking part?
Yes, it is.
Well, why are we here?
We bring all of our workshops here to show that there are some study skills that do not require modern technology. No computers, no calculators, not even electricity. Skills that require only 3 things: a book, a pencil, and some paper. We're talking about note-taking, guys, specifically taking notes from a book.
Now, that's a little different from the notes you take when you're in class. You know, the notes you take when the teacher's talking or when she's writing something on the board.
Some skills are the same, and some are different.
And I stink at this stuff. Let's get it over with.
Well, not just yet. First, we should talk about
Attitude. Attitude?
Yup, attitude. We can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a positive attitude.
You have to believe in yourself. Say I can, not I can't.
Now, let's get back to the note-taking skills. Note-taking from a textbook. Remember when we were talking about the SQ3R? We said that S is for survey, Q is for question, the first R is for read, the second R for recite, and the third R for review. We said surveying means giving the material the once-over. Anybody remember what comes after that?
Yeah, you said for the question part. Make up a question about each heading, and then as you read the section, try and answer that question. Next, recite the answer you come up with. Say it out loud. Then...
Let's wait a minute. How about instead of just reciting the questions and answers, you write them down?
Writing. I get it. That's note-taking, right?
It's a good part of it.
And what you want to do is not only write down the question and answer, but make sure you include the main ideas in the section and the key words.
What do you mean by keywords?
Keywords are the words that help you to recall the main ideas. This textbook practically gives you the keywords. They're the ones in blue, see?
Now here are a few tips to help you when you take notes. First, keep your notes as short as possible.
You should always try to do that. The fewer the words you write, the better.
Just make sure you don't make your notes so brief they don't make any sense.
Something that can help you to keep your notes short is to use abbreviations.
Can't you make up your own abbreviations?
Of course, as long as they make sense to you. You don't want to have to look at something a week later and have no clue what it was about. It's that personalization thing we talked about yesterday. Remember?
Let's back up. You said your notes should have main ideas and keywords. But is that all you put in your notes?
Well, you want to make sure you have all the important information, all the main ideas, plus the dates and the names.
Sounds like you mean whatever in a different color, or bold type, or italics.
Well, those are all cues that this is important stuff.
I still don't get how you know if you've written too much or too little.
Again, it's different for everyone. There's no one right answer. Let's do this exercise. Maybe it'll help. Here's a printout from the textbook. What we want you guys to do is take a highlighter and highlight everything you think is important. Things you would include in your notes.
All right, Sam, let's see what you got. Now, Sam is what we call a page painter.
Page painter?
That's someone who highlights or underlines everything. If these were your notes, they'll be just as long as the text in the book.
Now, Abigail here has been very, very brief. Looking this over quickly, I can see that she wouldn't have all the main ideas.
See, the essential thing is to find a balance. Enough so that you have the main ideas, the key points, but not so much you're just copying from the textbook.
So I guess this goes back to what you said the other day. It takes practice.
Yes, it does take practice, and it's a process, and you're really just at the beginning.
I hope I can do this. It's the kind of stuff I always have trouble with.
Mark, attitude.
That's right. Don't say I can't. Say I can.
Sometimes when you learn something new, you say, I'll never be able to do this. Does that ever happen to you?
My problem is I give up too fast. I'm gonna have to work on that.
Here's something you didn't tell us. I noticed when my sister takes notes, she writes down the page that the notes refer to.
That's a real good idea, because it helps you when you want to review, or if you think you need more information.
It's a good idea to only use one side of the paper. That'll leave you room to add anything.
And put the date at the top of the page. It can come in real handy.
Oh, and one more thing. Try to make a connection between your class notes and your textbook notes. See, if something appears in both your class notes and your textbook notes, you know it's important. So mark it with a star.
And on the other hand, if there's something that you don't understand, put a question mark next to it to ask your teacher when you get back to class.
Well, what about vocabulary? Sometimes when I read, I come across words that I don't understand.
Good point. And of course, we have a few tips about that. First, when you read, always keep a dictionary handy, so you can look up any words you don't understand.
Although, most textbooks usually have a glossary, or the vocabulary where it's highlighted.
If there's no glossary, look up the word, write it down, either in your notes,
Or on index cards. That's what I do. Then when I look at the cards, it's simply another way to review.
What about taking notes from a book that isn't a textbook?
Well, the rules are pretty much the same. Write down all the important information. Keep it short.
use abbreviations. And make sure it makes sense to you.
You might want to write up a summary of the reading, putting what you read into your own words. That's called paraphrasing.
Another thing you can do is write down your reaction to the reading, how you felt about it.
Whether you're writing a summary or a reading response, it's a good idea to do so as soon as you finish the reading. Otherwise, you're sure to leave out something that's really important. Oh, and one more thing. With any note-taking, it's a good idea to read over your notes, just to make sure you can actually read them.
So now, let's go over the note-taking tips. Then you'll get some handouts. Write down all important information. Be sure to include all main ideas and keywords. Keep your notes as short as possible, but not so short that they won't make sense to you in a week or two. Use abbreviations. Make up your own. Write down the name of the book and the page number that the notes refer to. Paraphrase. Put the information into your own words. Read your notes over to make sure you can read them and that they make sense to you. Use the note-taking method that works best for you.
I bet I know why we're here. It's a long-term project thing, right?
Right.
This is why I took this workshop. I have so much trouble with this. I know, attitude. So I'm willing to learn.
Well, first, let's talk about what we mean by a long-term project. Now, there are all kinds of projects, but what we're specifically talking about here is the type of project where you gather information, put it together in a meaningful, organized way within a required period of time.
What's the biggest problem you guys have with long-term projects?
Getting it done on time. I mean, it's so hard when you have a month to do something.
Who could plan so far ahead?
Before you start on a long-term project, you have to make up your mind to be responsible and meet your obligations.
I just heard the magic word, obligation.
That's really important when you have group projects. Because when one person doesn't do his
Or her.
or her job, everyone suffers. I know why Sam said her.
Last year we had this girl in our group on our project, and she didn't do her part and messed up everything for everybody.
Everyone was so mad at her. She just wasn't being fair to the other kids in the group.
So being responsible and meeting your obligations is the first step. The second step is planning.
This is where your monthly calendar is a must. You have to write down all the due dates.
And you have to actually look at the calendar.
You might say to yourself you have so much time to complete your long-term project, but all along the way you're almost sure to have short-term assignments and due dates. And it's very important that you write down all of those dates in your student planner or monthly calendar.
Like when the teacher says,
Don't forget that you have to turn in your topics on Friday.
or,
All project outlines are due next Wednesday.
or,
There's only 1 week to go. A week from Monday is the deadline for projects.
and if for any reason your teacher doesn't do that, you should. Divide your project into segments and give yourself short-term due dates for each segment. It's kind of narrow it down. That way you don't leave everything for the last minute.
And if you're working in a group, make sure everyone gets together and goes over the calendar and that everyone understands what's expected of him or her. Talk it over. Compare calendars. Write out the assignments.
Find a time and place to meet when everyone can be present and where everyone can give the meeting their complete attention.
Have each person say out loud what their assignment is and when it's due. That way you won't have any mistakes due to misunderstandings.
Once you've gotten your work schedule settled, if you're working in a group or by yourself, your next step is going to be to get all the materials you'll need for your project.
This is where good organization comes in. See, organization is the key. You need to organize your time, your materials, and your information.
So now let's get to the project itself. Step 1, pick a topic. But don't just decide this on your own. Ask your teacher for some help. Just because you think a topic is suitable doesn't mean it is.
I remember once, my brother did this whole big report for his history class. It was supposed to be a biography. He picked some football player. He thought it would be okay, but his teacher didn't. It was a real mess. So much work for nothing. I'm gonna make sure that never happens to me.
Once you get your topic approved, it's time for step 2. Do some general reading on the subject. That'll help you define the topic, kind of narrow it down, so you know specifically what you want to cover.
After you've done that, it's time for step 3, make an outline. For me, the best thing is mapping. Here's what that looks like. In the center, you put the main idea or big topic. Now, the big topic here is the Plymouth Colony, so that's in the center. Now, I know from my reading that some of the smaller topics I want to cover are why the Pilgrims came to North America, government, daily life, relations with the Native Americans. I like to do it as a map because it lets me see what I'm doing. It gives me a real clear picture. There are other ways to do an outline, though. You'll get those in the handouts. You too.
Now it's time to do some detective work, and that means gathering your information.
Here's where the trouble starts. The problem I have is knowing where to go.
I don't think that's so hard. There's a public library, the school library, books, newspapers, the internet, and there's people. You have the librarian, your parents, and friends.
And your teachers. Teachers love to help students. That's why they're teachers. All you have to do is ask.
It's important to keep track of where your information comes from. It could be a book, a magazine article, a website, or an interview.
Now it's time to put your information together in whatever form the assignment calls for. It may be a written report, a poster, an oral presentation, or even a video.
As you go along in this part of the project, it's important to first make a rough draft, then change it, get some people's opinions, edit it, revise it, and then do a second and third draft if you need to.
Keep at it until you're ready to do your final edition.
This has really been a help.
Great! So let's stop here for a recap, and then you'll get some handouts that'll really help you tackle a long-term project.
Choose a topic. Check with your teacher to make sure it's acceptable. Give yourself short-term due dates and mark them on your calendar. Ask for help if you need it. Follow these steps. Gather information. Use books, the internet, magazine articles, and interviews. Make an outline. Take notes. Organize your notes. Do a first draft. Ask someone else to look it over. Revise and edit until your final copy is ready. Be responsible. If you're working on a group project, remember, others are counting on you. Before we go, let's take a minute to go over some of the study skills we've covered in this workshop. Organizational skills. Make sure you have the supplies you need. Get an all-purpose folder. Color code notebooks and folders by subject. Use an assignment pad or student planner. Keep a monthly calendar. Reading a textbook. Use the SQ3R method. Survey, question, read, recite, review. Bring some information to your reading. Plan your reading time. Note-taking skills. Write down all main ideas and keywords. Keep your notes as short as possible. Use abbreviations. Paraphrase. Read your notes over. Long-term project skills. Choose a topic and have it approved by your teacher. Give yourself short-term due dates. Ask for help. Gather information. Edit and revise. Adapt these skills to your personal style. Be responsible. Tell yourself, I can do it.
This has really been good.
It sure has.
I bet now even I could take notes.
And even a long-term project doesn't have to seem so
Scary!
It's not scary as long as you remember what we told you from the very beginning. Developing good study skills is a process that takes time and practice.
Make up your minds to be responsible.
And be positive. Don't say I can't, say I can.
We can, and so can you.